Thanks for joining us on Bobbye and Tonilee Unplugged, where the message is always truthful, authentic, and inspiring. For more information on Bobbye and Tonilee Unplugged, visit bobbyeandtonilee.com. Now your hosts, Bobbye and Tonilee.
Hello, welcome to Bobbye and Tonilee Unplugged. My name is Bobbye Brooks.
And I'm Tonilee Adamson.
And we're here every day. You're listening to K-Praise 1210 a.m. every day at 10 a.m. And by the way, we are moving to 10:30, just so you know. And starting in the month of May, 10:30 will be on the half hour. Also, don't forget you can join us online at dailydisciples.org at your convenience. Find out about the upcoming events. We're doing a Bible study right now in the book of Romans. Also sign up for daily devotions. And if you have not checked out the Bobbye and Tonilee Unplugged YouTube channel, right now we are in studio with our very special guest. You don't know this guy. You've probably never heard his voice, but you're going to hear in just a second. But more than that, we want you to watch it. So you can go to Bobbye and Tonilee Unplugged on YouTube, and that banner is right there at dailydisciples.org. And you get to watch us and our very special guest. We want to welcome to the studio today, Mr. David Spoon himself from the David Spoon Experience.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
That's right. David's on every day from 2 to 4 p.m. right here in San Diego at KPRZ. This show does go out all over the world via podcast, iTunes, and on this global mecca thing called an internet. So if you're not familiar with David, we have an opportunity for you to get to know him really well, because we're going to be talking about his book called, is it His Appointment?
It's Church Disappointment with a question mark,
Yeah.
His Appointment.
Okay, I love it. And we're going to talk about that. So church disappointment. I don't know who's ever been disappointed at church.
Who hasn't?
Who hasn't been disappointed at church? But Tia, I'll let you start with the questions, because there's so much about Dave's life.
David, your story is so amazing, because you can see the hand of God in it, and yet it isn't like follow the yellow brick road. You know, there's a lot of like little monkeys along the way. And I would love for the listeners to hear from your heart, because we hear from you from 2 to 4 every day on KPRZ, 12:10 a.m. But you're then the interviewer. So now we get to interview you.
Yeah. Tables are
the hot seat. You're the hot seat. I want to know how was so what is your background?
All right, so I was born and raised in a Jewish household in Detroit, Michigan, and I went to Hebrew school. So when my friends were going to football and when they were playing different sports, I was in Hebrew school from 4 to 6 p.m. Monday and Wednesday, and then we went again on Saturdays and Sundays. So from my point of view, Hebrew school was kind of a downer.
Hebrew school.
I went to Hebrew school, and then in 5th grade, I actually went to a Hebrew school called Hillel Academy, and Hillel Academy is a private Christian school, or a private Jewish school that does 3 hours of Hebrew a day and 3 hours of English a day. So I did that in the 5th grade, and it was by the grace of God that I got through that and out of that into the 6th grade. But it was quite the upbringing, but it helped me really be able to speak Hebrew. It helped me to understand Hebrew. When it came time for me to be bar mitzvahed, is when a young man takes accountability to the law and makes that a public proclamation. I didn't need any training. I didn't need anybody to teach me very much. I just had my Haftorah. I was able to speak it in Hebrew. And then, of course, the day that I did my actual bar mitzvah, a rabbi was visiting from Great Britain. And instead of there being 200 or 300 people, as there was supposed to be on a Saturday, there was about 2,000.
Oh, my goodness.
So that was a little different. And then you grow up in Hebrew school hearing all the stories. Kids faint when they do that. And that's the only thing I worry about is like going, that type of thing. So I got through that process, and my family was well-to-do, is a good way to say it. We grew up about 3 miles away from Lee, Iacocca. So it gives you an idea of
Okay,
the
so
background.
Upper class,
you had a
though.
little bit of a
Upper
silver
class.
spoon in your mouth, you might say.
I would say it was an
David
extremely...
Spoon.
Yeah,
Yes,
with the silver spoon, yeah.
Exactly. From that, I got involved in being a participant and a purveyor of recreational pharmaceuticals.
Oh,
So,
gotcha.
for those that do
Love
not
that.
know what I just said,
I love that.
I
It
will...
took me a little bit
I
at
will-
first. I was like, okay,
I
wait,
will-
he just spun that.
Yeah, I'll explain that to you. So I got involved in drugs because in the drug culture, and this is one of the funny things about churches, in the drug culture, when you first get involved, especially as a kid, there is 100% full acceptance. There is, not only is there no restriction, but there is this open arm attitude of come be one of us. And when we had moved to a new city, right at my bar mitzvah time, I was in search of new friends, and it was the drug culture that actually opened their arms before
To you,
anybody
right.
else.
That's true, huh?
Yeah, so it's
how
fascinating.
How does that happen? I mean, I've always been kind of fascinated by how, do you meet somebody on the street or you meet somebody at church? How do you meet someone?
Not in church, for
But-
the drug culture.
But in the drug culture, where do you get introduced to
Right,
it?
so in schools, there are packs of kids, and packs of kids
Did
meet.
you not have that in your
No.
home?
Yeah.
Oh, see, we
No,
had
I
that.
didn't.
Yeah,
Okay, go
I
ahead,
didn't know
Dan.
that.
Yeah, we had-
Educate Bobbye.
We had packs where different kids would meet in different places. And if you're a new kid, you kind of walk over to one of the areas and see if they're going to be accepting, or you walk over to another area and see how they're going to respond.
So true.
So when I walked over to the area when they were where smoke was coming out, they were like, hey, come on, come talk with us, come and hang out with us. And I was like, okay, look, friends, it was easy kind of attitude.
Wow.
It was probably about 3 months later where I had learned the art of, okay, now I'm going to be deceiving my parents and nobody's going to know what's going on. And I'm going to slip into this drug culture with it's really a subculture in the school itself. And oh, by the way, just for reference sake, when they tell you pot doesn't lead to stronger drugs, wrong. Because I was not only a purveyor of marijuana, but then got involved in hash and acid and cocaine and four-way window pane, for those who are out there, you know what I'm talking about.
wow.
And you do go down this kind of darker road. It happens no matter what they try and justify. So I went down that road for a while, and my brother was in that road prior to me as well. Our family was dysfunctional. It was all those kind of normal American family things that were taking place.
Yeah.
Right.
And then my mom and dad got a divorce, and that was kind of,
How old were you?
I was 15.
Oh, that's hard.
boy,
Deeply
that's
into
tough.
drugs, but I was actually, my mom and I had separated and moved from Detroit, Michigan to Arizona. My brother followed, went to Arizona, and my brother was a kind of a drug brother kind of mentality. We would share some things. And then one day, he calls me up, and he says, how you doing, Dave? I'm fine, Billy. Why, what's going on? He goes, I want to talk to you about something. And I said, okay, go ahead. And he said, I want to talk to you about Jesus.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, wow, Billy found a new drug. Something's going on. This doesn't make sense. And he starts talking about the gospel and laying out the gospel from beginning to end. And at first I'm thinking, my brother's lost it. It's
Yeah,
done.
right.
He's over the edge. And for 2 straight weeks, he called me every night talking to me about Jesus.
Wow.
And for 2 straight weeks, I hung up the phone and went out and got high. I mean,
Yeah.
it just never stopped, never stopped.
Right.
One time in this 2-week period at the very end, he says, well, when you were a young kid and we were, hanging out together, didn't you like comic books? And I said, yeah, I love comic books. Why? He said, if you can envision the strongest, most powerful guy in the comic book realm, I said, yeah. And then the worst possible guy in the comic book realm, I'm like, yeah. He goes, that's like God and Satan.
Interesting.
And a light bulb went off in my head, and I thought, wait a minute. I've been reading that for years, but now I'm getting definition of something that was always
Yeah,
in the back
that
of
it's
my
a
mind. It was
larger,
this
bigger picture.
most bizarre kind
Yeah,
of way.
yeah.
People are like, well, that's bad. And this, but listen, whatever gets you to the Lord,
Yeah,
gets you to the Lord.
right.
And so he started going, and then all of a sudden I was listening, and the gospel became almost logical, a process in my own heart and mind where it's like, well, that makes sense. Well, that makes sense. Well, that makes sense. So I decided being Jewish, I would accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior and thereby cover the bases. In case it was wrong, I'm Jewish, I don't care. And then on the other hand, if I'm a Christian, I got that covered too.
Yeah,
So I went, I said the sinner's prayer, and then I went out and did my thing and got high. I was still dealing drugs, but I had this little reservoir that said to my heart and mind, it's true, it's true. And then one day, and I'll kind of leave you in this position, one day I was smoking some hash, bad thing to do, and God spoke to me two words, the same two. Never, ever heard God speak like this ever again. He said, that's enough.
Wow. Okay. All right. Well, we've got to take a break. I'm gonna hold Dave right there. Listen, this is fascinating. If you're just tuning in to Bobbye and Tonilee Unplugged here at K-Praise, we have the privilege today of getting to interview Mr. David Spoon from the David Spoon Experience. He's normally the one on the other side with the mic, interviewing us or other people. But Dave is sharing his story, and his story is actually in a book that he has written called Church Disappointment, His Appointment, which is available at hisappointment.com. If you go to dailydisciples.org, we also have a link to his book, and he has a very special offer that we're going to talk about after the break. And we're going to continue hearing Dave's story when God said to him, that's enough. What does that mean, and how did that transform Dave's life? So we got to take a quick break here at Bobbye and Tonilee Unplugged. Don't go anywhere, because we will be right back. Welcome back to Bobbye and Tonilee Unplugged here at K-Praise, 12:10 a.m. on every day at 10. Don't forget, in May, this may even be May. This could be June. You could be listening to this, who knows when and where. But 10:30 a.m. every day at K-Praise, and online at, lots of places. BobbyeandTonilee.com. DailyDisciples.org is the ministry. And don't forget, when you go to DailyDisciples.org, click the Bobbye and Tonilee Unplugged banner, which takes you to the YouTube channel, because we'd really love for you to watch the video podcast, because we have in studio Mr. David Spoon himself from David Spoon Experience, who is on every day from 2 to 4 p.m. He's kind of an icon here in San Diego.
He came to our events.
He's out of the
everyone
box.
Like, wow, you really are in living colors.
David Spoon is out of the box, and it is an experience. He's an experience.
It's an experience.
And as we're listening to his story, let's pick back up. I'll do a little recap. Dave was raised in a Jewish home, Jewish family, kind of well-to-do. Got into drugs at a young age. Instead of playing football, went to Hebrew school, and from there, his brother kind of proselytized you for a couple of weeks. You decided, why not pray the prayer, cover both bases,
right, little fire insurance,
and keep getting on there, exactly, and keep doing drugs. And then, what happened?
So that one time after Billy had shared with me and I accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, I was continuing down that same path, though, of getting high and doing things that I shouldn't be doing. And I was pin smoking, which is only code for those who would know, some Lebanese blonde hash. And the Lord spoke to me, just two words, and it was just out of the blue. And the issue that people need to understand is I had done enough drugs, I had done enough LSD, I'd done enough acid to understand what was hallucinatory and what was not, and what was a breach on that system. And when these two words came forward, I knew instantly. It was almost as though time froze at the moment. And the Lord spoke to me these two words. He said, that's enough.
Wow.
And I remember going, uh-oh, this is a problem. So I put out the hash, and I'm thinking, what do I do next? And it dawns on me that the Lord is trying to talk to me and tell me something. And it's not a great revelation. It's like two words and saying all that needs to be said. So I decided at that moment that I would take my entire stash, thousands of dollars worth of drugs, flush them down the toilet.
Wow.
I took all my pipes and my bongs, and expensive ones, and broke them and threw them in the trash can. I got down on my hands and knees, and I prayed what I consider still the most honest 60-second prayer that I've ever prayed to the Lord. And this is what I said to him. I said, I like getting high. I like the escape. But I can tell you don't want me to do this. But I'm not going to be able to unravel this by myself. I can't do it. So if you will help me and take this out of me, take the desire out of my heart, I'll follow you. It's all I can do.
Wow.
And that's what I prayed.
Wow.
And I went to bed. And I woke up the next morning, and it wasn't angels singing and rainbows and Skittles all over the place. Although I don't even think they had Skittles then. But it was more like I just knew that was it. Now we're going a different direction. Now we're going a different place. Now you're going on a different journey. And now you're going to find out that there's a lot more going on than you think or than you saw in the natural. And it was almost as though I knew that day that at night a part of me had died.
Wow.
And another part of me had been born. And so I got up and I was like, okay, now what? You know, it's like you got to figure out what to do next.
Right.
My brother had given me a Good News Bible, which was a good idea because it has the little pictures in there that are kind of like cartoonish.
Yeah.
So that kind of was really helpful for me. Got into the book of Galatians. Why? I will never know. And just started reading and consuming the Word and spending time in prayer and trying to, really hunt for God, really find Him. Started to connect with my brother, started to connect with some of his friends. We would go to any church and every church for 2 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
We went to it didn't matter what. In fact,
For a weekend.
we could not believe on a Friday at 3 o'clock that a church sanctuary wasn't open for people to go. We were like, what? This makes no sense. I mean, to us, it should be open all the time.
Wow.
So we went through this whole process, and eventually we found a gentleman who had a church who agreed to teach us and disciple us, which was like, oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
We've arrived, now we're there. The only problem with that is I went from drugs into searching for the Lord and having a pretty good well-established relationship with Him into a church that turned into a self-evolving shepherding cult.
Oh,
Right.
no. Oh,
So I went from temple
oh, no.
to drugs to Jesus
To cult. Oh, no.
And I'm like going,
No.
yeah. And so
Oh, no.
this process was overwhelming and that's where the history from the church disappointment, still His appointment, comes from. Because even though I had entered into the kingdom, the church process was a killer. I mean, it was really difficult. And I went through this dramatic 5-year experience at this church where I grew in the Lord, but then grew under some really negative teachings, some really inappropriate biblical elements. And every time I would challenge, because I was pretty studious in Scripture, the minister would say, well, I'm the pastor. I'm the one God has placed in your life.
Right.
I know what the answers are for
Submit to
this.
me.
Submit to me and follow what I'm saying. So I thought, okay, well, I don't know. He's a minister. What do I know? I'm just a Christian. How do I know? And it was through that process and then the eventual deliverance, and that's what the book is about, the actual deliverance from that element, and then the Lord confronting me again, teaching me, well, you went through that bad experience, but I didn't give you gifts so you can sit at home on the couch and make your Christian journey in your living room. You have to use those gifts to be a blessing to other people. And that started the next journey about being in service to the Lord in any church capacity, in any ministry capacity, whatever He wanted. The whole realm, though, and the whole book, The Church Disappointment, His Appointment, is about going from not being a believer to being wounded as a believer to then taking the next step of still presenting yourself to the Lord.
Right.
And the greatest teaching of all in that process was the Lord teaching me, you're just tasting a little bit of what Jesus went through. Because the church at large, or the temple at large, rejected Jesus. It was a terrible church experience, so to speak, for him. Even though he was on the path and he was the one, and they belittled him, they ridiculed him, they wounded him, but he still moved forward for the sake of the church. And it's like that story, I just got to touch the hem.
You chose, though, this is another part of the compelling part of your story, is that when you chose Jesus, what happened in your family?
Oh, my entire family, still to this day,
Yeah.
38 years later, disowned my brother and I. just 100% outright. My dad taught to us at a distance. In fact, the only discussions I had with my dad before he passed away were theological arguments. My mom, I will say, was the kind of the unspoken angel, because it's tough for moms to stop loving their kids.
Yeah, exactly.
And she would listen, but then after a while she'd go la 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 la, because she didn't want to hear it. But the entire rest of our family, hundreds of members in Detroit, Michigan, completely cut us off. No relationship, no connection, no anything, no acceptance, zero. So in essence, we lost our entire family. Billy and I are the first people as far as we know, in all of our history and bloodlines, to breach from Judaism. So you're talking 6,000 years that we know of, and they disowned us and disavowed us.
And cut you out of the will.
Oh yeah, well that's a whole nother.
I mean, in all seriousness, though,
that's
you
a big
took
loss.
huge steps to say, I'm going to follow Jesus. I mean, you really did leave when Jesus confronted the man who said, oh, I've kept all the commandments, and Jesus says, well, okay, leave everything and follow me. And he's like, well, I can't do that.
Right.
You did that in a sense. You really.
Yeah, we forfeited, I would say it's accurate to say we forfeited millions and millions of dollars. Now, I had a great pastor once say to me, it's awesome that the Lord puts you through those trials at the right time, isn't it? Which is like, yes,
I know, because
it is.
because
when you're a young man, and it's like, it's easy to
I
do.
don't need money, I've got Jesus.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, that wasn't as hard, but at the very end, just before my dad passed away, him and I went out to lunch, and this is one of those moments where you're in for the rest of your life, no matter what happens. We're having lunch. It was at Hobo Joe's in Phoenix, Arizona. And my dad says, I want you to come back to Detroit. I want you to take over the family business. I'll give you a condo. You can have 50% of the money.
Book, yes.
Yeah, and you can, and I was a young man. He goes, you can even attend, whatever college you want to, whatever, take over the whole thing. And then I'll just take the money that is on the profitable sense, I'll take the 50% that's left over. So it took me about 1 millisecond to say, Dad, Jesus wants me to stay in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm not going.
Wow.
I do see God's hand on that, though, with the divorce, that the Lord led you out
Correct.
of Detroit, because it would have been a lot harder to do it in that city with that kind of pressure from your family.
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%.
Yeah. I do have a question, though. You learned Hebrew when you were young. Did that ever bridge the gap when you started studying the Word, or not really? Did it just teach you how to study the Word?
Yeah, not for me. And it's one of those things where people will ask me certain questions in Hebrew, and it's been a long time, right? I probably know a lot more Greek than I do Hebrew. And so then I'll go, wow, impressive, but I don't really have much I can say. There's a couple of prayers I'll never forget. You never forget the bracha, which is when you're praying over the food and you're praying over the wine and so on and so forth. But it didn't
And Passover meals and things like that, remember?
I got stories on that. You would just die laughing, but it's because they're great traditions for American Jewish families. But by and large, it did not carry in to my Christian faith. Because for me, the Christian faith is not the Judaism element or the church element. It's my relationship with God.
Jesus.
We
And
feel
it's
the
just
same
that's
way.
just the key.
We feel the same way.
Yeah.
We're going to do
Great
something.
story.
Yeah, Dave, thanks so much for being
You're
with
welcome.
us on the show today. We're going to do something, if you're just tuning in to Bobbye and Tonilee, or maybe as you come to the end of the show today, we're going to actually continue another segment with Dave on our YouTube channel. So if you go to daredisciples.org, click the Bobbye and Tonilee Unplugged banner, you're going to get to watch a little extra with Dave, because we're going to bring you up to date on how he ended up on radio. All right? So this is a very big incentive. To on demand, you can just go to daredisciples.org, click the Bobbye and Tonilee Unplugged, and watch the YouTube channel. Also, hit it's church. Is it what? Church disappointment.
Right.
Church
Disappointment.
disappointment. His appointment, and hisappointment.com is where you can get Dave's book. A lot of the stories that he's been sharing are in the book. We've read it, and then there's so much more that's so, I don't know. It's refreshing. It's authentic. It's transparent. It's his life. So you can get access to that through hisappointment.com or daredisciples.org. Until tomorrow, God bless. Have a great day. We'll be back here same time, same station. And you've been listening to Bobbye and Tonilee Unplugged. God bless. Have a great day. And we will see you soon. Okay, if you're tuning in right now, Bobbye and Tonilee Unplugged here at the Bobbye and Tonilee channel, we're just going to spend a few extra minutes with our friend David Spoon from the David Spoon Experience at K-Praise 1210 AM. Dave is also truly a, as he calls it, local, national, and heavenly talk radio host. He talks all over the world. His show goes out all over the world through his networks and through our networks, and we're a big fan of his and also a good friend because we relate to his book, Church Disappointment, His Appointment, which is available at hisappointment.com. And we're making it, Dave, you've got a special offer on the price of this book. Will you share that?
Yeah, and just so everybody knows, we take no money from any money that comes in from the book. I know, it
all goes back
100% to getting more books and giving it to people that can't do anything with it. But normally the book is $15.95, and we have a special where it's $10.95. Wow. So it's a pretty good discount. It's about 35-40% or whatever. And if they click on the link, they'll be able to access that directly. And then we always encourage people, if you read the book and you mark it up, that's great, and you can keep it. But if you read it and you think it's good for somebody else, take it and give it to somebody else. Share it freely. It's like that's our mindset. Right. Push it around as best you can.
So hisappointment.com and then also daredisciples.org. We have a link to it on our website as well. And if you have any questions, you can call 800-992-0369. And Eddie, be sure to make a note of that on the radio shows as we're doing this for Dave, just so you know. Our, as you call, robo-producer?
Yeah.
We have to come up with a nickname for Eddie. We call him he's like our video producer.
For the YouTube channel, you mean, or?
Yeah, on the radio show, on the YouTube channel, put a note banner on there for Dave's.
Because you can't put a banner on the radio.
Yeah, not on the radio show. On the radio,
But
show.
puppet fingers, they can watch that.
On the radio show banner. This is the after show, you might say, on YouTube. So nothing is filtered on this.
There is no filter.
There's no filter.
Well, I've been told that a lot of times.
Yeah, no filter. So I want to know how you got swindled into doing a radio show in San Diego. How in the world did you get into this
I'm not trying to be offensive, so this is really what happened. So I've been involved in ministry and business for a long time. So being a Christian about 38 years, but being involved in business for, not that far different, probably about 35 years. And have been involved in helping raise private equity, taking companies public, just going through this whole process. And one time we were working on a safety browser that protects kids on the internet, and we were talking to, of all people, Salem Communications before they became Salem Media Group. So we did this process, and we were working with them, and it didn't finalize, but we were pretty close to getting them to promote our safety browser on all the stations, which at that point I think they had like 96 stations. I had been put in touch with somebody in corporate, and it was a very influential person in corporate, and I had a chance to talk to them personally, and he asked me, he said, what do you think of Christian talk radio? What do you think of Christian radio? And I said, I think it sucks.
I love it. I love it.
And there was a pause on the other line, which I don't think he'd heard that ever, And I said, it reminds me of, hello, Davey, the claymation times from back in the 50s or 60s. It's like, there's, it's not that the teachers are bad, but it's tough to listen to 24 hours of, okay, here's one sermon, okay, here's another sermon, okay, here's another sermon. Even Jesus slept. I mean, there's a break here. And so in my mind, I thought, why isn't there more of a little bit more entertainment where you can talk, you can teach truth, but you can talk about the fact that the Padres aren't that good, or you can talk about the fact that this restaurant's fantastic, because that's a part of the Christian walk.
And life.
And then even in just things that take place with your own children or your own work, your own fellow work people, or any situation at all. It's just a part of life. I mean, when gas is $4.50, it's just as irritating to the Christian as it is to the non-Christian.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, let's talk about that. So I had brought that forward to this individual at corporate, and he provoked me with a very interesting challenge. He said, do you think you can do any better?
Interesting.
And, it's a terrible thing to say to a prideful Jewish guy who's a Christian, has a Baptist ordination and a Pentecostal ordination. So what was my response? Without even trying, I could do better.
Right.
Of course, that's my response. And then he said, okay, well, we'll see. And then I got a phone call. I met with the general manager in San Diego. And then I got a phone call about 2 weeks later saying that we're going to put you on. And I'm like, great. I thought I'm going to do Saturdays because that was the original discussion.
Right.
It'll be kind of Saturday Night Live-ish, but with the Christian element. That'll be interesting. It'll be teachable, but it'll be entertaining. And they're like, great. We want you to go Monday through Friday, 2 to 4 p.m.
Oh, my
I was
goodness.
like, what? What? And I thought, okay, well, I decided, you know what? If this is the door that the Lord has presented, He knows what I can and cannot do. Let's do it. And it was November 5th, 2012, where I did my first show. And we did a trial show, which went very well. It's for whatever reason, it's very comfortable. I had been involved in radio, but only in an extremely minor capacity prior. And the first show that I did, when I was done, I was like, that was fun.
I was
Yeah.
created
That wasn't
to
even
do
work.
this.
Yeah, that's right.
And then I've been doing it ever since.
Yeah, you're going on 4 years now.
Yeah, well,
You've been
3 and a half,
doing-
yeah, so we're 4 years, and we do those little DDDs, little devotional
Yes,
diamonds of the
yes,
day, and that's when I'm reading
yes,
scripture and the
that's
scriptures
right.
become bold. We've probably taught about 4,000
Oh, wow.
in about 3.5 years.
Yeah,
so there's quite a
wonderful.
few. Yeah, it's like,
Wonderful.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
cool. I love it.
Yeah, we're listeners. Every time we're in the car, we listen to your show, and I love your format. I love that you bring an element. I love you bring this element to radio and Christian radio that does not exist. We changed the name from Dear Disciples Radio to Bobbye and Tonilee Unplugged because some of the same reasons. It's like, we are not that we're not in that box either. It's like
Right.
the Christian box we don't fit in because we value church, we love church, but I think that your book, Church Disappointment, His Appointment, is so important because Christian people hurt Christian people. We hurt each other through these boxes that we
Yes.
all put ourselves in. So it's refreshing to have a radio show that talks about real life.
Yeah.
And I love your weather report. I love your traffic report. It's like Dave looks out the window. Yep, weather report.
Yeah.
Yep, looks good, sun shining.
The weather's nice. Did you live in San
Yeah,
Diego?
right.
Was it? What are you crazy?
That's
This isn't
kinda-
Cleveland,
That's what you get.
I mean,
So, what has been your response in San Diego? How do you feel about the audience?
tremendous response from a large amount of Christians. Fascinating response from Christians who have been hurt
Yes.
and know. So there's like that instant connection. And then we also have, listening to the show, we have atheists and agnostics who regularly
Awesome.
listen to the
Yes.
show because it's not about picking on them or even picking on a denomination or picking on anybody.
Right.
It's about finding our way through to drawing one step closer to the Lord.
That's
I
right.
mean, that's what
Exactly.
it's about. And in that process, being honest. So we don't understand how an atheist person thinks, but it's not that they don't exist. And so, there's a way to communicate and a way not to communicate. And I think the show at least brings the notion that we can look at this and examine this together. Not agree, but examine it together.
Right.
It's like, okay.
And you're not afraid to have people on the show that don't agree with you.
I have a lot of people on the show that don't agree with me. And I get a lot of emails. I get some emails that are like, they're very life-giving. And then there's
Yeah.
other emails that are like, they wish it was life
I know.
withdrawing.
We're the same way. It's
Yeah,
like,
that
we have the
happens
same
on a
thing.
pretty regular basis like that.
We have the same thing.
you
If
gotta
we
do the best.
argue on the radio, we'll have people that call in or write in and go, are they fighting? Did
Are
they
they
break
okay?
up? Are they okay?
Yeah.
It's like, we just disagree,
Yeah.
But sometimes Christians are so afraid of conflict. It's like, oh my goodness, you don't disagree. I'm sorry, it's life.
Well, that's so true to the point where now the church, because it doesn't want to have conflict with the world,
Right.
won't say anything.
Right.
And I
Right.
just did a DDD the other day on the fact that somebody in the political race said we should just get over it when the world is doing something different. And 1 Timothy 3:15 says that the
interesting.
church is the pillar and foundation of the truth. You don't get over it, you declare the truth. And if they don't accept the truth, that you can't do anything about that.
Right.
You don't no realm there. But you don't just cower, become a mouse, and disappear.
Right,
And
right.
even a church mouse, by the way, makes noise, or you wouldn't know it's there.
Right.
So I mean, you gotta have some
the
kind
church
of.
becomes very, I think, almost apathetic in
Yes,
some ways.
exactly.
It's like we're not doing anything. And
Overly complacent.
I'd rather stir something up. Jesus
Passive.
says, I'd rather you be hot or cold, but don't be lukewarm.
Exactly.
I'll
exactly.
vomit you out.
And if you think about the process, Jesus I mean, there's this mentality where Jesus walks around and he's going peace and he's got beads and puts flowers in Pharisees' ears or something. It's like some weird. It's like this was a person who was very specific. Sheep over there, goat over there. There's nothing else. That's pretty divisive. I mean, no matter what you say.
Well, my favorite thing about Jesus is whenever he told them in John chapter 8 when he says, "You worship your father, the devil." And he's talking about, and they go, our father Abraham. Our father's Abraham. And he's saying, no, your father, you worship the devil.
I mean, that is
if you don't believe in me as your father, my father God, if you don't believe in me, then your father Abraham is the wrong father. I mean, it's like, when he gets into all of this, can you imagine?
Oh, I think when even on Sermon on the Mount, I mean, I think it's 5 or 7 times where he goes, but I say unto you, but I say unto you. That's like going, you know what these guys said?
Yeah,
exactly. Listen to what I say.
Right,
it's like, wow.
Yeah.
It's like, that's a change.
It's crazy. It's
and
crazy.
to say to a Jewish audience, eat my flesh and drink my blood. I mean, that would just be like, what? You know, heresy.
It's funny.
So,
amazing stuff.
We could go on and on. Dave, thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate it. We'll have you back on, and we'll be back, I'm sure, on your show.
Yes, absolutely.
We love coming on the David Spoon Experience. And again, you are watching the after show here at Bobbye and Tonilee Unplugged. Don't forget, you can check out Dave on Facebook. I do encourage you to go to facebook.com, keyword David Spoon Experience, and like his show. He does a lot. He posts every day. I was liking one of his scriptures and devotionals he posts every day. Lots of stuff going on there. And don't forget, if you're in San Diego, from 2 to 4 p.m. every day at 12:10 a.m. And you can live stream, get the kprz.com, download the app, and live stream all over the world his show every day, as well as ours at 10:30 a.m. Use the technology, okay? Tell your friends, tell your family across the world to get in and get involved. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching Bobbye and Tonilee Unplugged right here. We hope to see you again soon. God bless and take care.
Thanks for tuning into Bobbye and Tonilee Unplugged. Tune in every day on air and online. For more real life, real answers from Bobbye and Tonilee. Subscribe to the Bobbye and Tonilee channel, and for more information, visit bobbyeandtonilee.com.